Hey y'all, welcome to season 4, episode 1 of the Peace Podcast. Happy 2026. We are in a new year, and I know that new year sparks opportunity to develop resolutions and also to think about what we are going to focus on for the upcoming year. And I like to provide a little help in this because I pick my word of the year. If you haven't watched those pods, roll back to the previous couple of years. I have my little handy dandy notebook here. Shout out Blue's Clues for that, where I write my things down in my faith journal. And this notebook only comes out once a year to be written in, but I reference it throughout the year to evaluate how I am working toward that word of the year. And so I love to come on here and talk about how that has shaped my year, how it has propelled me forward into the next year, because I think that we can all stand to have a little nuggets from other people to motivate ourselves to go into the spaces that we're all going into with just some ability to formulate a plan when we're going into those spaces. And so I take my journal out. This journal has what my word of the year was for the previous year and what I was believing for that year. And I just reflect on how did that go and what am I hoping for the upcoming year. So a little bit about why I started doing this. There was always that trending thing where people were picking their word of the year. And that word of the year resonated with me because resolutions can become this to-do list of things that we're marking off. And it felt like opportunity, but it also felt more like a larger to-do list that kind of was an umbrella over all of the things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis. And I didn't really love that idea. And so I latched onto the word of the year. And throughout the years that I've been doing this, it has kind of morphed and evolved into this focus area for the year. And the way that I have been able to choose my word is strategically just listening for things that I hear myself doing or behaviors that I find myself repeating that I don't necessarily love. And when I reflect back by using this journal, of the word for the previous year that I picked, there are so many spaces in there where I start to notice the things that I focused on and that went well, and the things that I know are still an opportunity for improvement for me. And so that's how I land on my word. Oftentimes it's just dropped into my spirit. Sometimes I hear the word and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like something in me just feels compelled to be aligned to that word for the upcoming year. This year specifically, though, some things happened, even though this wasn't the word that I was focusing on. Two very big things happened in my life this year that there was no way to misconstrue what was going on because they were almost exactly the same behaviors with very similar results. And so I was like, you know what? This is something that I don't do on habit, but that I need to start doing more of. And that became apparent to me back in September. And I kind of wrote the word down in the notes in my phone and pushed it to the side because I knew that it wasn't what I was currently trying to focus on, but I also knew that it was something that I needed in my life to continue doing because I had seen the fruits of doing that thing. I also didn't want to weigh myself down with trying to focus on that word while at the same time focusing on my word for last year because that word was very important. So last year I picked the word freedom, and there were several reasons for picking this word. It was aligning myself with the idea that I knew that I had continuously contorted myself to fit in boxes that other people had created for me. And I was tired of doing that. It happens when you're creating content. People want to hear something from you, and when you're creating the content and they don't hear it the way that they want to hear it, then they have things to say. They talk about your physical appearance, which happened several times this year. And they talk about, the off-puttingness of the message that you're putting out, etc. And in years prior, I would have thought about my message a little bit more as it relates to the people who are hearing it. But this year I was like, there's freedom inside of knowing that this was something that God gave me this year, knowing that it was something that I learned from, knowing that it was an experience that shaped me, and sharing it just because that is true. And that's why I always put the disclaimer on these pods that says whatever that looks like, because that might not be your experience. It might not be the thing that changes whatever you're experiencing or going through in your life. But it did it for me, and so I share it with you because that could just be the thing that you need, but also it might not be. And that's also okay. I can only speak from my own experience. I can only speak from my own personal life. And so I share the things that have happened in my life that created change, that sparked something new for me, that helped me to grow and move into the places that I wanted to be in and to become who I wanted to be in those spaces. So I gave myself the freedom to be exactly who I was created to be. Content included, physical appearance included when creating content. And I also knew that there were places that I was constraining myself in life. I had become so overwhelmed with all of the expectations that had been placed on me with parenting and in relationship. And I wanted to be the best at those things. And the best sometimes causes you to judge yourself and also compare yourself to what everyone else is doing. And so I valued being the best, but I kind of put to the wayside that sometimes the best was not necessarily my best. And so I started to just hold space for the fact that my best is good enough, that my best was going to be the best that I would walk into, and that would be enough. And so there was freedom inside of that. I also allowed myself to no longer be shaped by what other people expected from me, but to learn the lessons that I needed to learn, to mentally sit in the space that I needed to sit in and heal the things that I needed to heal so that I could walk the way that I needed to walk. And sometimes that meant not going into the spaces that people expected me to be in. Sometimes it meant doing the thing that everyone else thought was the wrong thing because I knew it to be the right thing. And sometimes it meant saying the thing that was the truth, because saying that thing was really important to the spaces. It needed to be said. And I held that truth within me instead of just saying it out loud. And so the freedom to just be existed so heavily in this past year, to be able to just take a breath. And we all want to be seen, right? Like we all want to be able to be seen for exactly who we are. And sometimes when we are seen for that person, it requires us to be more of that person. We can't fully be seen if we're not vulnerable enough to be who we're supposed to be. And so I believed in this year for a lot of things, but I wrote them down in my journal, and I'm encouraging you to do the same. Write these things down for you to be able to see what's happening in your life and what you expected to happen so that you can keep account of those things. And so I believed for full freedom from the past, and I'm going to share with you in a second about how that full freedom from the past actually shaped my word for this coming year. I believed in healing of my people-focused lens, so no longer living up to their expectations, but truly just being my best and allowing wherever that landed on their expectation continuum to just land wherever. I believed for dropping the comparison and judgment. And that was a huge piece of not trying to be the best at everything, but just being my best and having that be enough. I believed for fully consulting me and God only. And that showed itself in so many spaces where I wanted to go externally and ask the questions or the advice, but instead I stayed internal and asked myself and consulted with God. And then if I needed to consult other people, I had a foundation for that conversation, which was so freeing. And I believed for doing what I was led to do, which is what I was telling you about the content speech. Like, God made us the way that we are to parent the children that He gave us, to do the things that we feel purpose to do, to be in the relationship that we're in, to be in the spaces that we occupy. And in order to fulfill that purpose, we have to actually be ourselves, because that was what we were crafted to be. And that doesn't mean you can go out here acting haphazardly, but it does mean that you can consult with yourself and know what your core wounds are and try to grow and shape yourself into the person you want to be, but also know that you were designed to be in the spaces that you're in. So be you in those spaces, because the spaces need more of that. And then I also was believing to flip my body image issues on their head. And there were some health things that happened this year and some other things that occurred that I had to seek medical advice for. And I landed in a space where I feel fully comfortable with the way that I look and being comfortable in my skin, but also knowing that I wasn't crazy for feeling like something else was going on and something was wrong, because it was, and not life-threatening wrong, but there was something going on in my body and I knew it to be true. And so for that piece of advice that I have for you is, there is freedom in knowing that there's something going on and not stopping until somebody gives you some type of answers that aren't just pushing your symptoms into some box that they've created, but actually figuring out what's going on with you. And then there's a plan that comes as a result of that, where you feel affirmed and validated that you weren't just crazy for thinking that something was wrong. And so that happened for me this year. And then the last one was just really becoming how He sees me and who He sees me to be. That one is really hard for me because I always aspire to be more, but I found the balance between aspiring to be more, but also still knowing that the more that I want to be is a piece of who I am. Like, I'm not somebody who can stay stagnant, and that's okay. It's okay to be that way. And so I said that one, the first one that I shared with you about, having full freedom from the past, is the catalyst that led to my word for this year. And so I'm just going to tell you that story, because that really was the thing that happened around August, September, the two things that happened that led me to the word. And I'm walking you through this because I think it's really important not to just choose a random word. It is really important to sit with yourself and find something that has meaning for you, because that thing is really going to shape and change. Like, picking freedom wasn't just a random word. It wasn't just I want to be free. It was, what do I feel is weighing me down from this past year? And what do I need to focus on to get rid of that weight? And so this year, when I was and I've told a little bit of this story, but the smaller one is that we don't live in the school district that my kids go to school in. And that has something to do with my previous toxic relationship. And so we had moved to this school district. My daughter had to change schools when she was in second grade. And so when we got to the school district, I was very happy with the schools. I was very happy as an educator. And it makes it really difficult because you kind of criticize. And I was very happy with where she was. And then when my son started kindergarten, very happy with where he was. And when leaving that toxic relationship, I had to leave the school district because I couldn't afford to financially take care of us in that school district. So I had to move to a different neighboring county and different school district. And initially, the school that my son goes to was not going to approve his transfer. And that meant a lot of things, because not only was the school that he is district for a place that I really didn't want to send him, but also I'm a commuter. And so I commute from the current place that we live through their school district to get to where my full-time work is. And there was not going to be someone who could be here to get him on the bus for this school district. It was a whole slew of things. And they don't give you the information until late July, and school starts like the third week in August, which gave me like 3 weeks to try to figure out what I was going to do. And I was distraught, and I was a mess, a wreck, because in order to take him to the school district that I'm in, it's about $20,000 because it's out of state and it's a whole thing. And so I was like, well, it doesn't even make sense to be in the financial place that I'm in, where I'm financially becoming free, than to have to pay tuition for the school. And so anyway, I white knuckled the whole thing. I was reaching out to everybody that I knew. I was trying to figure out a plan to try to give him a different address, not illegally, but there was a whole plan to try to figure out what we were going to do. And this time when I reached out to his principal, that his hands were tied, because it was a county-wide initiative that they were doing to have less kids in the classroom, and it was a whole thing. And so I had reached out to the person who handles it, and that person ended up resigning in the middle of our conversations, which was a whole nother crazy piece of it, because I was like, really? What are the odds that happens in the middle of this whole thing? And so then it was communication with the superintendent, because that was the only person who was handling these type of matters. And initially he told me no. And then, as you know, my youngest goes to therapy, and thank God for his therapist. And I reached out to her, and I asked for her medical opinion, and she was like, I really don't think that switching schools is the best thing for him. And I sent the letter to the superintendent, and I was like, it's all I got. There's nothing else I can do. And in the midst of trying to white knuckle it and figuring out all the things and being the mom that I am, the leaving no stone unturned type of mom, I felt this sense of, you're going to have to be at peace with whatever happens, and you've exhausted all measures, and you've done everything that you can do, and there's nothing more for you to do. So I literally got down on my knees, and I just prayed fervently, like, what can you do? Because I know that you are the creator of all things, and you're the knower of all things, and your will is going to be done in this situation. I'm like just asking him to consider, all the options, which I already knew that he was, but I was handing it over to him. And there was something that happened on the day that I went to work for the first day, which was way before my kids did, that prompted me to find this form that basically rejects their rejection of the transfer and give medical reasoning for that to need to happen. And I got a letter from his therapist, and I filled out the form, and I sent it to like 7 different people. And then that was the only direction that I felt led to do. Everything else was me crafting the plan and me white knuckling it. But this thing was a feeling that I had, found the form out of nowhere, really didn't know that was something that I could do, honestly, and then filled out the form and left it. And literally the next day, I got the message from the superintendent that said that he would be accepted as a transfer. And while that doesn't seem like a big deal, to my day-to-day life, it was a huge deal, because there really wasn't another option that I could figure out that would make sense, because I'm a single mom. I'm doing it by myself. There isn't somebody. I could call my parents and do all these things, but the logistics of that were just too much. And so when that got accepted, I was like, wait, I did all of that, all the white knuckling, all the figuring out of all the things. And all I had to do was just let it go to him, and then ask him what he needed me to do. And it was that one thing. And I'm like, had I done that 3 weeks ago, I would have been way less wigged out, way less frustrated, way less anxious about the situation. And the other place where this happened, very similar type of situation, and I've told this story on several occasions, like I wasn't getting any monetary help from his dad. Like there was a child support order in place. He was refusing to pay it, and it was an interstate case, which meant that he lives in a different state than me, and so my state couldn't really enforce it. That state had to do it, and if you dealt with anything inside of that whole family court system, it is a mess. And I had called people that I wasn't supposed to call and emailed people that I wasn't supposed to email. I had to get really assertive with my caseworker, and all of it felt like I was just treading water and just trying to keep my head above the water, but also like nothing was happening. And so I was like, you know what? This is crazy. Like I financially can do this by myself. I'm believing that God is going to be the just God that he is. And I'm going to stop doing all these things. Like I have to stop doing so much because none of it, like I shouldn't have had to do the work in the first place, but none of it was working. None of it was doing anything. None of the emails I was sending or letters that I was sending, like people didn't want to talk to me because they weren't supposed to. Like it was all for null. And I was like, so you're doing all of this and you're stressing yourself out doing all these extra things, but none of it is working. So we're going to stop. And so I stopped. And I did the same type of prayer, got down on my knees, and I was like, listen, it's not even about the money anymore. It's about the fact that this money could be taken and put into an IRA. It could be put into, a college fund. But I'm sending him to therapy and I'm paying for that and I'm doing all these things by myself, and I feel blessed that I financially can take care of all of these things. But it's not just because I didn't create him by myself. And I'm getting chills just, thinking about this story. But a week later, and these things tend to happen pretty quickly for me, and that's why it was so blaringly obvious that this needed to be the focal point. But a week later, I got a direct deposit into my account, and it was the child support money, and it was not just the monthly payment, but it was some of the arrears as well, because it's years worth of child support that haven't been paid. And my jaw hit the floor, and I also cried because I was like, I did all that work, but the only thing that I really needed to do was to pray about it and trust that God was a just God. And literally a week later. Now, a lot of people that I've told that story to have said, well, don't you think the legwork that you did prior was part of it? And no, I don't. Like, I think the system is slow moving. I don't think it's their fault. They have so many things that they're dealing with. But I don't think that it was any of that, because none of that, everything was hitting roadblocks. None of that was actually working. So that happened. And to me, that was enough. But to God, he knew that I had asked for freedom from my past. And a couple of weeks later, I got a text from my son's father, and he was asking if I could call him. And my body, if you've been in a toxic relationship, you know this, but my body had a visceral reaction. Like, I literally was shaking. My teeth were chattering. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. And I thought I was beyond that, because after going to the court several times, I had gotten my body to stop reacting that way when he was in the room. But something about having to connect with him again. Now, we do the pick up and drop off, but it's normally with a third party there. So I didn't really ever have to be in a space with him alone. So being on the phone with him just felt like a lot. But I won't give you all the details of that conversation. But what I will tell you is I called him, and it was an hour-long conversation. And not only did he admit to all of the torture that he put me through, but he also apologized. And that was the piece that was for me. But throughout that whole journey, I didn't just want this for me. I wanted it for my son too. So after he apologized and admitted that, he had done the things that he had done, his next question was, what do you think he needs to feel better in this space? And that was the question that meant the world to me, because then we got to develop a plan to actually co-parent in such a way that my son doesn't feel the way he feels and have to go to therapy. And he still goes, but it's not as necessary as it was before. Like before, I was like, we don't miss therapy appointments because this kid really needs to talk to somebody. Now it's like an added benefit to have her for him to speak to, but I don't feel like he's, gonna melt in a corner when he doesn't see her, because what his fear was based around was our conflict. And so when he asked me that, then we were able to develop a plan to change that. And I didn't even ask God for those things, right? Like I'd ask him for those things in the past, but in this circumstance, I didn't even ask him for those things. I just wanted for us to be able to financially both support our kid. And it became so obvious to me that I was surrendering wrong. And I created a video about the fact that I had been surrendering wrong all along, because I thought I was giving things to God, but I was giving them to him in the 9th inning. I was never consulting him about the equipment before we ever even went on the field. It was all the way to the 9th inning. And so I know now that those two things, though miraculous in my world and may not seem that big in other people's world, but for me, miraculous, especially that last part of him asking to have that phone call. I know that that wouldn't have happened if I had not surrendered it to him, because I was worrying so much and making myself sick over having these two things come to fruition that I was realistically grinding my gears together and nothing was moving. And so that's even more frustrating than when you're like actually seeing the fruit of your labor. And that was so toxic to my system. It was like being back in that relationship again. There was no difference because of all the work I was having to do to get him to do what needed to be done. And so this year, I am surrendering it all. Like I have a lot of things that I need to happen this year. I got engaged last year, so that was super exciting. And we have a blended family and we're looking for a house. And we've been, feverishly searching and scouring the real estate pages, and nothing that is what we have wanted is coming up for us. And so I kept getting frustrated about that. And I was like, you know what? You've surrendered these two things and look how they turned out. What if you just surrender this to him? What if you surrender so that your life can be filled with less worry and more faith? What if you just stop trying to figure it all out and just hand it to him and say, tell me what you need me to do, like I did in that instance with my kids' school. And then just be obedient to the one thing or the two things that he needs me to do, because he's got the rest. Because spinning my wheels trying to figure out his job doesn't work. And so I'm focusing on being obedient instead of having to carry the weight of everything. I'm believing for that house that will have all of our needs met. I'm believing that being a step parent in a situation that has a lot of moving parts is maybe not the way God designed it, but that he also knows me and he knows that there's something in me that is capable of being the best me in that space. And I'm believing that even when those things get conflicting and chaotic, that he sent me the partner that I need to be able to do this, to be able to do it without feeling like it's all on me, to have someone shouldering the weight. And so I am taking it to the altar this year. I am taking it there first in complete surrender, because I know that his way is better. and his will is better than mine, and his plans are better than mine. And I am no longer going to sit and ruminate in my own thoughts, but I'm surrendering to him. So the word for this year is surrender. And if I would not have paid full attention to the times where surrender benefited me in a year that I wasn't even focusing on it, and that surrender also gave me freedom. So it did fulfill the word that I had been focusing on. But if I hadn't really been thinking about it and focusing on what I was seeing happen, I would have missed it. And so for you this year, I encourage you, don't just pick a word. Don't just pick a trending topic. Don't just pick a to-do list of all the things that you want your body to look like, or, that you see other people focusing on. But truly sit with you and say, what is something that gave me hell this year? And what do I want to focus on to no longer have to live through that hell? And let that be the thing, whether it's your word, whether it's your resolution with a bunch of checkpoints or whatever it is, but let that be your thing. And then my other encouragement to you is, when you pick your thing, let it be your thing. Don't let the voices from other people tell you that that's not it, or that's not big enough, or, they're doing all these other major things and yours feels so small. Because it's in the things that feel the smallest that the greatest miracles can happen in your space, just like they did for me. Though those things don't feel like a big deal, the weight of anxiety and just overwhelm that was lifted off of me, you can't put a price on that. And so I'm just so thankful that my vision was clear enough to see it, and that I was able to walk through it, to know that this year's focus is surrendering it to him. And then my last piece of advice for you is, once you pick your word or your focus, write it down, make it plain, and refer back to it so that you don't forget. Make checkpoints in your calendar quarterly to come back and see how you're doing with it, what more you might need to do, and if you need to study more, if you need to intellectualize a little bit, if you need to include an accountability partner, whatever it is that you need, just know that those resources are there, but you can always reach out to me. I do coaching sessions, so that's also something that we can do together. I appreciate you for being on this journey with me for season 4 and for all the seasons before. And I encourage you to share this message with somebody that it might resonate with, because we all know that when we share message with other people, it could just be the catalyst of change that they need to break free from the bondage that they're in and surrender what they need to surrender to God. Thank you all for tuning in, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you again next time. Hopefully with your word selected or your focus for the year selected. See you next time.